China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: a human rights group accuses Israel of using starvation as a weapon as more deadly airstrikes hit the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. The United States Defense Chief arrives in Israel as pressure mounts for a ceasefire and more hostage negotiations. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea fires its most powerful ever long-range missile, the second in as many days. And a third term in power for Egypt's Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as election officials declare him the winner of the presidential election. Hamas health officials say at least 110 people have now been killed in fresh airstrikes on the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. Around 50 people are still thought to be buried under the rubble with no heavy lifting equipment to free them. Israel has confirmed it's operating in the area, targeting what it says is terrorist infrastructure. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch has accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war. The group says the deprivation of food, water and fuel in Gaza amounts to a war crime. Meanwhile, the United States Defense Secretary has arrived in Tel Aviv. Lloyd Austin's visit comes as the UK, Germany and France step up their calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. International and domestic pressure has been growing on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to negotiate another hostage release deal with Hamas. 3 hostages were accidentally shot by IDF forces on Friday. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Trent Murray, watching events for us in Tel Aviv. Trent, Lloyd Austin now in Tel Aviv. What more do we know about his visit?
Well, Jamie, touching down in Tel Aviv, Secretary Lloyd Austin says he was here to deliver several messages. The first was America's ironclad commitment to support Israel. He said he wanted to get an update as well on IDF operations in Gaza. But I think crucially we heard he said he was going to speak to the Israelis about what the metrics were, what the parameters were for them potentially to move to a new phase of this war, away from those sort of high-tempo clearance operations which we've been seeing, heavy aerial bombardments and similar, and moving towards a more targeted operation which focuses on high-value individuals in the view of the Israelis, in other words, leaders of Hamas. And we know that those discussions have been taking place today as Washington and others grow concerned about just where this will lead. Of course, as the casualties continue to mount in Gaza, there is growing international pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to try and do more to reduce those deaths. But certainly the rhetoric coming out of Tel Aviv right now doesn't seem to signal that the Israelis are prepared to back off anytime soon. Benjamin Netanyahu continues to repeat that there are 3 main goals of this IDF mission. The first is to bring home all those hostages. The second is to eradicate Hamas. And the third is to make sure Gaza never turns into a place again where terror operations can hit Israel in the way that they did on October 7th, according to the Israeli government.
But many more countries calling for a ceasefire.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've been hearing from individual countries in the past several days, including the United Kingdom, Germany, France and others, but we expect that this issue will come up really imminently, actually, at the United Nations. It's expected a draft resolution will be put forward very soon. It's been drafted by the United Arab Emirates. We have some of the text here, according to the Reuters news agency, which says that the text will call for an urgent and sustainable cessation of hostilities and allow allow the safe and unhindered humanitarian access of aid into Gaza. Now, we understand negotiations are still taking place between the United States and the UAE. The US allegedly has some issue with the language around cessation of hostilities, and they have said that the officials in the UAE know what will pass and what won't at the UN Security Council. Of course, it's worth remembering that as a permanent member, the US does get veto power. It vetoed the last UN security resolution regarding a ceasefire. So still, you know, like so many moments at the UN, much to kind of wait and see there whether they can get agreement. But this is just the latest in the types of international pressure we are seeing being placed on Israel. We're also seeing it, of course, from the European Union, from the African Union, many other players in the region, as those casualties continue to mount in Gaza and more questions are raised over just when the Israelis may be willing to back off slightly on this style of operation.
Trent, thank you for that. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Noor Harazin, watching events for us in Gaza. Noor, we're hearing these reports of deadly airstrikes on the Jabalia refugee camp. What's the latest you're hearing on the ground?
Well, yes, intensive Israeli strikes on Jabalia refugee camp overnight and also the early hours of this morning, specifically in central Jabalia camp, the block where here Palestinians call it Alwan and Al-Burj families block. We are talking about 10 homes that were destroyed during the Israeli strikes that destroyed this whole block. Palestinian Health Ministry talked about 130 people between killed or missing, still under the rubble of their homes, and the paramedics or the civil forces did not manage to reach them or evacuate them. And this happened during the past 24 hours. However, just half an hour ago, also more intensive Israeli strikes on Jabalia refugee camp, on Alwan family home in southern Jabalia. Also, people are talking about 120 people stuck under the rubble of the homes, including the Palestinian journalist Abdullah Anwan. And this is only in Jabalia refugee camp. There is also other Israeli strikes. For example, an Israeli strike that hit Nusayrat refugee camp overnight killed 10 people, including the Palestinian journalist Haneen Qishta, and she is also a very famous Palestinian journalist here in Gaza. This brings up the death toll of Palestinian journalists killed in Gaza since the 7th of October, up to 90 Palestinian journalists.
Noor, Human Rights Watch saying today that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war.
Yes, of course, we have been talking actually about this. This is a starvation war. I mean, I myself never thought that we will actually reach this point. I will actually witness this happening to the people of Gaza, or me going through it. There is rarely any access to clean water, no access to food. The markets, the shelves are empty, no necessities here in Gaza. If some food is available, it would be canned food from some of the donations that managed to reach Middle Gaza. However, the UN distribution of the aid is very slow. Now Palestinians are actually gathering on the front gate of the Rafah border in a way to stop the trucks where they can, let's say, hijack the trucks and take the water, take the food for themselves because of the very slow distribution from the UN, adding to the fact the small number of humanitarian aid trucks entering from Egypt over the past week. And each day, Egypt allowed from 90 to 110 aid trucks every day, while yesterday was the first day where 10 humanitarian trucks actually entered to the Gaza via the Kerem Shalom border between Gaza and Israel.
Noor, thank you for that. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Now the rest of the day's news, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has test-fired its most advanced long-range ballistic missile. South Korean authorities say it flew for just 73 minutes, but has the potential to travel more than 15,000 kilometers. Our correspondent Jack Barton reports.
The intercontinental ballistic missile, test-fired by the DPRK, landed in waters just west of Hokkaido in Japan and drew immediate condemnation from South Korea and its allies. The launch follows a meeting between South Korea and US defense officials last week to update what would be a joint response to a potential nuclear attack. A meeting that drew warnings from Pyongyang that it would take what state media described as further offensive measures. Tensions between the DPRK and South Korea have spiked since Pyongyang's launch of a spy satellite last month, after which Seoul also launched its own first satellite capable of observing military movements north of the demilitarized zone. The moves led to Seoul partially and Pyongyang fully scrapping a 2018 inter-Korean agreement that was aimed at reducing tensions and the likelihood of a flashpoint along the DMZ. Following the launch of the DPRK's fifth long-range missile this year, South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol called for a joint response with the United States and Japan by utilizing their recently established missile information sharing system. Jack Barton, CGTN, Seoul.
At least 8 people have been killed in an explosion at one of Guinea's biggest oil terminals. The blast in the capital, Conakry, blew out windows of nearby homes, forcing hundreds of people to flee. 84 people are reported to have been injured. The terminal stores most of the country's imported oil products. The cause of the explosion is being investigated. Kenya will soon have duty-free access to the EU market after both parties signed an economic partnership agreement. The EU is Kenya's first export destination and second largest trading partner. Trade volume between the two sides passed $3.6 billion last year. Both the Kenyan and the European parliaments must ratify this deal before it comes into force. Millions of Iraqis are heading to the polls to elect provincial councils for the first time in a decade. Ballots are being cast in 15 regions, with the results expected to consolidate the power of the ruling Shiite Muslim alliance. Some opposition groups have said that they'll boycott the vote, which is being seen as a test of Iraq's young democracy. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, another 6 years in power. Egypt's president sweeps to victory again in an election with no serious challenges.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos and unicorn companies. Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. A human rights group accuses Israel of using starvation as a weapon as more deadly airstrikes hit the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. The United States Defense Chief arrives in Israel as pressure grows for a ceasefire and more hostage negotiations. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea fires its most powerful ever long-range missile, the second in as many days. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has swept to a third six-year term in office, winning almost 90% of the vote in an election where he faced no serious challenges. This comes as the country struggles with a slow-burning economic crisis and tries to manage the risk of spillover from the conflict in Gaza. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Adel Al-Marouki, watching events for us in Cairo. Adel, I guess no surprises really here. The opposition says this election and the election campaign were flawed. What more can you say about the results?
Well, the results indicate that the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi won a little less than 90% of the entire vote. And what the authorities here are saying is the biggest turnout in Egypt's electoral history, 66.8% turned out, according to the elections authorities' announcement today. We're talking about roughly 44 million Egyptians turned out in Egypt and in the voting procedure that took place in Egyptian embassies all across the world. In general, it seems that these figures are record figures, according to the elections authority, and it even surpasses the turnout that happened in 2012 and 2014, where two uprisings changed the rule structure of Egypt since then. And now this goes on to give the Egyptian president his third and final six-year terms in power.
The election campaign was dominated by the economy and the rising cost of living. Did al-Sisi offer anything new on this?
Well, the Egyptian president is actually expected to be speaking very soon, to give a speech to the people of Egypt right after the official announcement of his success in the presidential bid. I've spoken to several members of parliament who attended the announcement here, and they say that the economy is definitely on the agenda. And one of the main demands from members of parliament, at least, is a new cabinet to take the lead of a massive economic restructuring that is quite essential. Egypt's pound has been devaluated several times. It's being traded in the parallel market at about 40%, 60% less value than the official prices in banks, and therefore economic restructuring are quite essential. It is expected that the president will have a cabinet reshuffle soon. But in terms of plans announced by the president himself, nothing has been announced, at least yet. We're waiting for him to speak and see exactly what challenges he will be discussing in his first speech after the official announcement.
Adel, thank you for that. Our correspondent Adel Al-Marouki in Cairo. Opposition parties in Serbia are calling for protests after President Alexander Vučić declared victory in Sunday's snap parliamentary elections. His ruling party, the Serbian Progressives, is projected to win around 47% of the vote. But opposition groups are calling for a recount, accusing Vučić of electoral fraud. Our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic reports now from Belgrade.
Recurring images of celebrations at the SNS headquarters after the announcement of the election results. For 11 years, the SNS has consistently secured victory in Serbian elections, either as a part of a coalition or independently. In Sunday's elections, the Serbia Must Not Stop Alliance, led by the SNS, won more than the required 126 parliament seats.
The Serbia Must Not Stop list will certainly have more than 127 mandates. We don't know whether it will be 128, 129 or 130. The result of this election is that one list, Serbia Must Not Stop, will have an absolute majority.
Meanwhile, the leaders of the main opposition coalition, Serbia Against Violence, rejected the election results. They say the campaign was unfair and the results are fraudulent.
We'll fight using all available democratic means against the theft of votes that happened today in Belgrade and across the Republic of Serbia. And that was prepared during the previous days.
According to the preliminary and unofficial results, the SNS-led alliance got around 46% of the votes, while the opposition, Serbia Against Violence, got around 23%. While this margin is substantial, it does also show a significant split among the voters, with those in urban areas being more pro-opposition.
I'm dissatisfied with the state of culture, public opinion, security and the state of an unhealthy life that is very intense in every way. Literally, I'm dissatisfied on every level. Don't get me started about finances.
I think the opposition has a very small chance. I wish it was different, because in what way is autocracy good? In no way.
Although the parliamentary election results are quite clear, the local race in Belgrade remains considerably close. Those results are yet to be announced, with both sides having unequal chances of victory. In the next 4 years, the SNS will have to tackle a string of difficult domestic and international issues, those including the status of the breakaway province of Kosovo and Metohija, then growing economic difficulties, and balancing EU membership aspirations with close ties with Russia and China. Aljoša Milenković, CGTN, Belgrade.
Flash floods have inundated parts of northern Australia after tropical cyclone Jasper dumped a year's worth of rain. Emergency workers had to rescue a crocodile from a flooded drain in the state of Queensland. Hundreds of people were cut off in the city of Cairns as floodwaters swallowed roads and homes. The local airport was temporarily closed as planes were partly submerged on the runway. And heavy snow has disrupted large parts of China as far south as the province of Guangdong. Temperatures there have dropped well below zero in northern areas, disrupting road, rail and air transport. It was minus 15 degrees Celsius in Beijing on Monday. Alerts have been issued across several regions, with the freezing weather expected to continue for several days. And at least 14 people have been killed after a major storm lashed eastern Argentina. The storm hit the port city of Bahia Blanca, south of Buenos Aires, on Saturday, bringing heavy rain and powerful winds. Several buildings were damaged and power cut in some areas. President Javier Milei has offered condolences to the victims of the families of the victims. Germany's transition to green energy is being held up by red tape. By 2030, the country hopes to fuel 80% of its electricity needs with renewables. Several new wind farms are being built, but many are not operational because of a slow approval process and regulations. Our correspondent Natalie Carney reports.
This is what patience looks like. It might not be much yet, but once complete, the 160-meter-high wind turbine that will stand here will provide electricity to some 4,000 people annually. Thomas Schulwald from the Freiburg Green Energy Group takes me around the site of their latest project. Despite operating over 100 publicly funded renewable energy projects, including this older wind turbine, breaking ground on their latest one in the southern state of Baden-Württemberg is particularly exciting. Back at his office, Thomas tells me why.
We started thinking about it back in 2015 and 16 and only had approval a year and a half ago. The biggest challenge is the very long procedures, the very complex procedures, but also with the regulatory authorities that a lot of time passes.
He says it will take another 2 years until the new turbine will be contributing to the local power grids, so a daunting 10 years from start to finish. Germany is aiming to double its onshore wind energy production to 115 gigawatts by 2030 in order to achieve 80% of energy production fueled by renewables that same year. Yet even with making old turbines more efficient, reaching that target is being made difficult by layers of bureaucracy.
The wind energy expansion this year is only about 2/3 of the goal.
lots and lots of regulation has been added or has been made more complicated. We have federal level, we have state level, we have regional level, we have a city level. And on each of these levels, there are obstructions to wind energy.
From delays in federal permissions to excessive state regulations, many of the hurdles appear to be driven by outdated conservative views, say experts.
Even after final approvals have been given and materials acquired, lawsuits can further delay construction. With many wind turbines built in the forests on hilltops, many of the local communities sometimes try to stop the project in order to protect the local species or to stop any potential noise pollution they may cause. And some of these court cases can drag on for months.
Yet some winds of change have been blowing through Berlin since the establishment of the Green Party in the federal government, and measures have been taken at the EU level to accelerate the implementation of wind energy across the bloc. However, with only 2.9 gigawatts of installed wind energy capacity developed this year, it's clear much more active production is needed to reach 115 gigawatts to power Germany's electricity sector by 2030.
We would have to expand by 10 gigabytes every year. We are clearly behind and now have to actively accelerate so that we can at least partially achieve our goal.
But it's important to keep in mind that the electricity sector is about a quarter of energy that we use, right? There is also heating, there is transport.
Therefore, even if Germany meets its wind energy targets, there is still a long way to go. Natalie Carney, CGTN, in Freiburg and Munich.
The headlines again. A human rights group accuses Israel of using starvation as a weapon as more deadly airstrikes hit the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. The United States Defense Chief arrives in Israel as pressure mounts for a ceasefire and more hostage negotiations. And the Democratic People's Republic of Korea fires its most powerful ever long-range missile, the second in as many days. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next is World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to the weather forecast. I'm Tammy. Well, over to Europe. Snow will continue here for many of the north as well as the eastern portion of Europe on Tuesday, and it will be even likely to intensify into more of moderate to heavy intensity of snow as we head into Wednesday. Meanwhile, another round of wet weather is likely to develop here from Iberia Peninsula all the way towards into the west of Russia on Wednesday as well, with a potential wintry mix, and that is mainly due to the arrival of a weak cold air, and temperature will also take a few degrees drop for the rainy areas from Tuesday into Wednesday, so please be well prepared. And about business in travel and potential winter mix for both Copenhagen and Stockholm, as well as Helsinki on Wednesday. And Helsinki will be rather cold. Both the high and low temperatures will be in the negative readings, and Moscow will also see wintry mix with a high of 2 and low about -1 degree Celsius. And for other major cities across the western portion of Europe, and showers for both London and Paris with high temperatures in the double digits. And down in Madrid, we'll see some partly sunny skies in the afternoon hours. But notice that the temperatures difference between the lows and highs will be above 10 degrees Celsius. So please dress up accordingly, particularly put on an extra layer during the morning and evening hours to stay warm. And that is all from me. Stay tuned for more City Forecast.
This is CGTN.